Hello again. Welcome back to the Mission 43 podcast. Today we have an amazing guest couple, Katie and Jarrett Redman. They're two superstars within the Mission 43 community, and they have an amazing story about successfully transitioning to civilian life here in Idaho. Let's get started. Yeah! Join us in learning about the stories and the people who inspire us. This is the Mission 43 podcast. Thank you, Jarrett. Thank you, Katie, for being here, guys. I know you're taking time off your ridiculously fancy and awesome jobs and away from your family to be here to do this podcast. So thank you very much for being here.
Yeah, thanks so much. It's a pleasure.
So to get people the little window into the Redman family here, Jarrett, you're a part of cohort 3 of the Leaders Fellowship.
Yeah, that's right. So we've been in Idaho just about 3 years now after transitioning out of the Army.
Yeah, and so what did you do in the Army?
So I ended as a civil affairs officer. Spent 11 years total in the Army, which is kind of an awkward time to transition. Most people, I think, at that point make the decision to go the full 20 and retire. But after my last deployment, did some soul searching as a family and decided the right move for us was to come to Idaho.
And Katie, what were you thinking at that point? You're midway, or he's midway through his military career. What was your thought process in the decision?
Yeah, I think I was actually probably the one to maybe even suggest the transition at that awkward time, knowing that Jarrett was on a pretty, frequent deployment schedule.
Yeah.
And so for me, I definitely was pushing him, I think, to make that transition. Yet I'm a fairly risk-adverse person when it comes to those major life decisions.
Right.
So yeah, it was a little. It was definitely scary, but I think both of us, we just came to the conclusion that it was going to be the right thing for our family. And we wanted to be back here in Idaho for sure.
It's always impressive for me to hear stories about couples like you, people like you that, really bet on themselves. Like when they get out, hey, I could take the easy path, the easy button, and stay here. And in 20 years, I'm guaranteed I'm going to be retired and at least start the next chapter. But you guys have some sort of confidence in yourselves, and you've had some objective, remarkable success in transitioning to civilian life. Were there any stumbling blocks when you first got here?
Oh, man. Yeah, you go.
Yeah, hard to pick just one. I think you mentioned betting on ourselves, and really this was the first time we'd bet on ourselves in a huge way, right? So RSOF, going through selection and assessment and things like that felt like a big bet. But worst case scenario, if you fail going through RSOF selection, you're still an Army officer.
Right.
It's not really that big of a bet. But after my last deployment, we started doing some math, and we were like, okay, my oldest son's about to turn 7. I've been gone 3 years out of his life.
Yeah.
And your reward for doing well in a deployment is hey, start going through the pre-mission training cycle and, get ready to go do it again. And so I think stumbling blocks, my transition was pretty quick. So I got back from Ghana in April, and I started leave, my post-military leave in July. So there were really only 3 or 4 months there. And really early in the advice cycle, people were really quick to say, oh, well, don't worry so much about where you want to transition to. Don't worry about location. Focus on getting a job. Most employers, they're hiring in Seattle, right? Denver, New York City. So, be really open and flexible on where you want to go to. And we were like, hold on a minute, we're getting out of the Army after 11 years of being told, where we're going to live, and where we're going to go, where I'm going to deploy to.
Right.
This seems like a really good time to kind of take a step back and figure out where we want to go. And so, yeah.
That was definitely one of the biggest challenges, is getting a lot of unsolicited advice and determining which advice you wanted to take and which advice applies to you in your life. Because for the first time, you're deciding everything, like you said, where you want to live, what you want to do, what your personal brand is. Jarrett will probably always carry some of the branding of his time in the military, and that service is always going to be with him.
Sure.
But there was even more of a personal branding piece required, right?
Yeah.
And coming up with that and figuring out, seeking mentors that you never needed to seek out before, and figuring out who are we post-military life as a family, who are we individually in our careers and our professional growth, and determining the advice that matters and applies to you. Because some of that, I mean, a lot of it was, don't necessarily look for a specific job, don't look for a specific location, be open to everything, because you just need to make sure that you're financially secure after.
It's the nice way of saying take what you can get.
Take what you can get.
Yeah.
You're lucky to have it.
Go ugly
right?
early, right?
Yeah. And that wasn't the case for us necessarily. We knew we wanted to be in Idaho. We knew, I knew that I wanted to work from home, which 3 years ago wasn't as common as it is now.
Right.
And so you have to put yourself out there and figure out and tell people, this is what I want and this is what I'm going for and these are my limits.
When you guys were still active duty or whatever, when you were active duty, were you still in your career at that point, or were you full-time military spouse and mom?
Full-time stay-at-home mom.
Okay,
We have
so
3
you're starting your
kids.
career from scratch.
Sort of. I had worked before, but I stayed home for 7 years at that point.
Okay.
So I felt rusty, and I felt completely unprepared to enter the career force again. I didn't even know that I was going to, actually. So that was one of the, it was like 2 transitions at once.
Right.
Jarrett was looking at getting out, and he was learning all of the skills required to find the career that he wanted, going on LinkedIn, right, building connections that he hadn't needed to build before. And I was looking at it, and I was like, I've been really hungry to start a career again, because through the military, it's been such a challenge.
Right.
The unemployment rate for spouses was enormous at that time. Still is large, but it was way bigger even then. And so that was a journey that I was starting to embark on too, as I realized I want to go back to work. And so that was another challenge we were overcoming. But I learned a lot from Jarrett's transition, so we kind of did it together in tandem. Actually, in some ways, it made it easier to get over that hump or that jump, that leap of faith, right? As long as you're both doing it at the same time.
Well, that's impressive. I mean, you guys are making big life changes while you have 3 children at this point. And I can't believe it's only been 3 years since you guys have been here. You seem like such staples of our Mission 43 community now because of your involvement in all these things, honestly, in the best possible ways. It's amazing. So what has the past 3 years like been for you then?
It's been stable. We've lived in one house for 3 years. It's amazing.
That's a bonus.
That's a bonus. I don't think we've ever lived in one house for 3 years.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and we were talking about this a little bit on the car ride over, right? If you look back in hindsight and you look at the path that we could have taken going to ILE and then back to Fort Bragg, and back into that PMT and deployment cycle, where our kids are right now and where our family is just such a better place, right? And so it's reaffirming that having taken that bet on ourselves, it's really paid off. I was up skiing at Bogus Basin with our 5-year-old over the Christmas holidays. We both work from home for Amazon. We're in complete control of our calendars, and like the work-life balance compared to what I had in the military is just it's hard to compare. So there's no question like that this was the right decision for us, and we're just super happy. I mean, you mentioned how active we've been with Mission 43, and like Mission 43 has made it so easy to join the community and to find like-minded leaders and just people who are kind of in the same place in life.
And through the pandemic. I think that was one of the biggest challenges when we came here.
Yeah.
The pandemic hit right after. So building a community, especially when we're not originally from Idaho,
Right.
was a huge challenge, right? Trying to find your people, that's tough. It's tough enough when you're trying to find your people in a new place, but then through the pandemic hitting and everything shutting down and isolation, right? I think Mission 43 was a godsend for sure, because Jarrett was able to quickly connect with people with shared values. And I think now we're just starting to feel like the transition is complete almost. Jarrett pointed out today, we've all had dentist appointments in the last year with
Hey.
the same dentist. Like, great things, right?
Yep.
We had optometrist appointments. That's when you know you are completely set.
Only things that military families would like truly appreciate.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Jarrett was laughing earlier because I still sent our Christmas cards to an address that we hadn't lived at for 7 years, which is, if you're a military family, I think everyone has done that before.
Oh, yeah.
Sent your items to the wrong address, but still did that this year.
Well, you guys work for Amazon, so it's okay.
It's okay. It's
You'll
fine.
fix it.
Yeah, it'll come back to us somehow.
Can I ask a marriage advice question? So you
Sure.
guys both work from home for the same company.
Yes.
How do you stay married?
We have our own offices.
Oh, that's good.
with a lock.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Actually, I think that helps. We get that question a lot.
Well, I know Amazon's a really small company, so I'm sure you run into each other
So
all the
small.
time.
We run into each other all
Yeah.
the time. Actually, we run into each other surprisingly often. We're
Really?
both program managers within talent acquisition.
Gotcha.
But in different parts of Amazon. So it's not too close to home, but it does make us grow. It helps us grow professionally together too. I can talk about things with Jarrett, and he can be a sounding board and provide guidance and advice. Probably not as much vice versa. Sometimes you just need to talk it through with somebody. You know, there are obstacles you're overcoming through your career, and at least I've got a good office mate who I know will give me sound judgment and sound judgment without being judgmental.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that says quite a bit. But are your kids now, well, through the pandemic, I should ask, they weren't in school, obviously, probably, right? They were at home?
Yeah, they were at home. So we are not from here, but my parents moved up here
Oh, good.
right before we moved.
Okay.
So that's been a huge help. And I will say, and one of the main reasons that we did move to Idaho, having family nearby has just been an incredible, I can't even, I guess it's just been such a value add.
Yeah.
Having that support network here for not just us, but for our kids has
Sure.
been wonderful.
Absolutely.
And we didn't have that for however many years. I mean, 7 years of our kids' lives. So,
Right.
yeah, it's been wonderful. So so my mom is a retired teacher, and she actually she spent a lot of time with the kids. I don't think that's how she envisioned her retirement, but thank goodness for that.
The gift and the curse of being grandma.
The gift and the curse. Yeah, it's been wonderful though.
That's awesome. Well, so how did you guys come upon Mission 43? Like, I mean, you came here to Idaho, not being from here. You had some network, but then COVID comes about. It's 2020. It's chaos. Dogs and cats living together. At what point did you hear about Mission 43?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think a couple things, like really quick. So just some background. My dad transitioned. My dad was enlisted in the Army in the 60s. I think he made his transition out of the military in 1967. And I think about that a lot because the difference in what was available, he ended up in Wenatchee, Washington, going through flight school. But the difference in the support that was available for like my dad and his generation coming out of the military versus the support that I've had is just night and day. So I think one of the challenges as being on active duty when you start your transition, in some ways everybody has an agenda or is trying to sell something, right? So
Right.
I went through a JMO recruiter, and they were very much trying to, I interviewed with some companies, did really well, had job offers in, like Missouri, right, which wasn't where we wanted
The
to be.
jewel of the Midwest.
That's exactly right. And so trying to sort through all the different layers of resources that are available and like figuring out, what's driving them, what's driving their mission. And so we knew we wanted to come to Idaho. That was our end goal. And I came across the Mission 43 website at one point and was reading some of the background behind JCAF, and like, here's an organization that's trying to invest in the state of Idaho, invest in future leaders. And that really is like, that's the whole incentive, right? And so at that point in my transition, I think I was already interviewing with Amazon. I was on a pretty good path. So I think I registered with Mission 43, got the hat, and then started listening to the podcast. And that was like, it's all been kind of downhill from there, and like has led to so much more, going through the Mission 43 fellowship, volunteering, going to different coffee hours and things like that, and just all the opportunities that it's provided has been like truly overwhelming and like a blessing for the family.
Well, I want to take this opportunity to thank the two viewers of our podcast, you and my mother, publicly. Thank you, Mom. That's really cool to hear, and it's funny how people stumble across things that can be, like me, life-changing. But Katie, at what point, like, when you were in, did you identify as a military spouse? Was that like who you were, or
No.
is it just a part of things? I don't know. I'll let you explain it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that in my mind, the military was always Jarrett's job.
Yeah.
And I was worried that and looking back at the time, I don't think I knew it, but I was worried at the time that if I identified too much as a military spouse, then that was our whole life.
Mm-hmm.
And there were things that I still wanted to do in my life. Looking back now, I recognize that a lot of the growth came during that time. And why I'm where I am now is because I was a military spouse. So I wish that I had appreciated it during the time. Because I think that there are a lot of skills to be gained. There's a lot of grit and perseverance that comes out of that lifestyle that I didn't appreciate at the time. But yeah, I can honestly say I always knew that at some point I was going to build my own career. Mm-hmm. And when we transitioned, it was just the right time for that. So now I identify as a former military spouse, right?
Can I ask you, if Jarrett was still in, do you think you could, your career could be where it's at now?
I think it could. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Knowing what I know now, but I never sought it out.
Right.
Because I didn't feel the push. Transitioning out of the military and deciding what we wanted for ourselves, knowing we wanted to come to Idaho, knowing I wanted to work from home, things like that. I felt like there was the freedom and the push to go ask for it. Mm-hmm. And I never asked for it before that. So I didn't even know if it was available to me. I always just assumed it wasn't. But once I asked for it, and once I put out my brand and I said, this is exactly what I want to do, it was surprising how fast it came to me. Does that make sense? So I just,
it does.
Yeah.
I got to say, Zach Tibbetts, our employment director, would be so happy to hear you talking about your personal brand. But how did you do that, especially, kind of from scratch after 11 years or so in the military?
Yeah, so a lot of it first was observation with Jarrett starting his transition. Mm-hmm. And I realized, first off, I wasn't working. I wasn't gonna leave a job behind when we transitioned out. So there was really no risk. There was no harm in going on LinkedIn, right? Mm-hmm. Setting up my profile all over again. It was pretty rusty when I went back on there. And figuring out, I knew with 3 kids at home, I knew I wanted to be home. Mm-hmm. I wanted to work from home. I needed that flexibility. I knew that at the time, we didn't know exactly where we were going to live. We were hoping for Idaho. But in a weird pivot of events, we could have ended up in Missouri, mm-hmm. the jewel of the Midwest.
Right.
And so I ended up just saying exactly what I wanted. And I put it out there. I knew that I was going to be in talent acquisition again because that was what my career was in previously. And I think it was a matter of weeks that I was offered an interview. And it completely blew my mind. Once you say what you want to do and you're pretty definitive and you've got your guardrails and you know what to say no to, it's amazing how fast it can come your way.
Well, I've spent a lot more time with Jarrett than I have with you, Katie, like through his Leaders Fellowship experience, and I hope that you will soon be a part of that. But at the same time, like, where does your confidence come from? Because I follow you from afar, and your remarkable success in your career, like, and being able to stand up as a person and say, kind of, this is what I demand. Like, you get it.
I think that's. I think some of that comes from being a military spouse. One of the benefits that I gained was having to do some things on my own while Jarrett was gone, right? Most military spouses gain that at some point or another. You're not doing everything on your own, but you are doing a lot of things on your own. Our cars never broke down until Jarrett was deployed.
You're right.
Usually because I hit a trash can when I was leaving the driveway or something like that.
That's neither here nor there.
Things happen, right? Things happen when they're deployed. You learn from that. You just get through it. You find out that things keep going on and everything comes back to normal at some point. There's a confidence to be had when you find out what you can do by yourself. And Jarrett is a big part of that too, instilling that confidence and pushing me to do things that he knows I can do even when I'm wavering. But I think a lot of it just comes from you dig in, you do it, you find out what you can do, what you can't do, what you're good at, what you're not good at, and you just do it. I'm not afraid to fail. It's something that I think we talk about a lot too, and that transition was part of that too. You can't be afraid to fail. You just had to jump and decide what you want. If it doesn't happen, something great will come along.
So Katie won't tell you this, but her interview with Amazon, she took that interview from a gas station in Missouri. We were driving from Fort Bragg to Boise in a minivan. 3 kids, the dog, everyone. I don't think we hadn't taken showers in probably 2 days, right? And she's on the phone, and I'm taking the kids into like the gas station, McDonald's.
Oh, yeah.
And she's out there, interviewing for a job at Amazon. And then that was followed. She accepted that job, right, which was awesome. But then I was waiting, like I was still interviewing and like looking for my role. And we were living with her parents for like almost 2 months. So
that was fun.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I guess my point is like, it was definitely challenging. Like, don't want to understate that. And it's kind of funny looking back now. Like, these are things you can only kind of piece together looking in the rearview mirror.
It's certainly not all rosy. The challenges are there for sure. And there were times when we were pulling our hair out, like, oh my gosh, Jarrett just needs to pick a job, and we need to move out of my parents' house for our sanity and theirs. And there are always those times where you just decide, do you just take something that's offered to you, or do you keep waiting out for the thing that you want?
Well, your philosophy of like learning how to self-advocate is huge, and something to be, certainly learned from the rest of us. And jumping in, as you said, like, was there ever a point during this scary portion of the transition where you guys looked back and thought about what was in the military? Like, did you ever think about going back? Did you ever think about doing the half in, half out, reserves, guard, anything like that?
Yeah, so I made the decision early on when I put my refred packet in that I didn't want to limit myself, and my future sort of opportunities by having one foot still in the guard and the reserve. So we made the decision to completely separate. It was the right decision for us. In fact, like, long story short, they won't tell you this when you're separating, but like, I still have reserve recruiters reaching out to me asking me if I want to like join the reserves again, right? So it's not a one-way door decision. I think, and full disclosure, like, the first job I took at Amazon was not a program manager job working from home where I controlled my calendar. It was in operations. At that time, they didn't have the Amazon logistics footprint that they have here now with like Boy 2 and the fulfillment center in Nampa. So I was actually working in Portland, Oregon, and I was commuting back. I was working night shift. And then, on my days off, I was trying to drive back on the weekends, making the drive. So I got to know the Columbia River Gorge really well.
Oh, yeah.
So it wasn't easy. It was challenging. And, I think there were times there where we were like, wow, this is just like the military, right? Like, Dad's not home. He's off working. And so there were times where we were like, this is hard.
Yeah, I kind of forget about that now, because when all of the pieces of the puzzle that you have in your mind, that when they finally all fall into place, you kind of forget about how it got there. Like, what did it take to get those in place? And yeah, Jarrett was driving a lot, actually. We knew that he would be able to transfer to Boise when the buildings came available here. But yeah, that took a little bit of time. And actually, it took a little bit longer than we thought, too. So we were prepared for, I think, around 6 months. And I think it was closer to a year that you did that.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's quite a commute. But at the same time, I think a lot of people aren't willing to, a lot of us veterans and military spouses think that, I don't want to say entitlement, but like when we get out, like, hey, I was a major or a sergeant major or whatever, like I should step into this perfect role for me. But usually that doesn't happen that way.
Yeah, I don't want to offer anyone prescriptive advice, but I think the biggest piece of advice I would offer as you're looking at job opportunities, and certainly there are things now, skill bridge programs and things like that didn't exist when I was separating just a couple of years ago.
Yep.
But I would say one of the biggest questions you can ask yourself with any job offer is, what am I going to learn in this job? And truthfully, like, just to be 100% transparent, in some ways, I promoted pretty quickly at Amazon from area manager to operations manager. And sometimes you go back and you ask yourself, well, was I underhired, right? Should I have been hired as an operations manager? And what I realized looking back now is I learned so much in that role by coming on as an L5 instead of an L6 at Amazon. So much about how to lead as a civilian versus in the military. So much about how to work with numbers. And this is something else I was just thinking about. Like, Katie was working as a recruiter, I was working as an area manager, and we would have these problems we would want to solve. And Katie was better at Excel than I was, but like we would stay up together at night, like pulling pivot tables out and like.
It's a real nerd fest.
Yeah, it was a nerd fest, but
it sounds like it. It sounds terrible. I don't want to do that at all.
Thanks for saying that, Jarrett.
Last time we're ever going to be invited onto the Mission 43 podcast, Dan's mom does not want to hear about our Excel
Pivot
endeavors.
tables.
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay. But there are things that now, like working from home as a program manager, it wouldn't have been good for me to start my current role without having that background and learning those things that I learned. So I guess my thing, what I was trying to say is, like, ask yourself, what am I going to learn in this job? And if you can figure that out, there are jobs and roles out there that may not be your long-term dream job, but that you're going to grow from. And that will lead to that opportunity that you're looking for.
That requires patience and humility, two things that I'm not very fond of. But no, I mean, really the humility part, like to say, like, I know that I don't know enough to be willing to learn. And that's unique. Do you guys think that that's inherent to you, just as the people you were raised to be, or did the experience of the military or something else help?
I think you find out sometimes all the things that you didn't know or you don't know
every day.
And those humbling experiences then are able to be recognized later when they come at you again. But there have been plenty of times, even just in the last few years, going back to work, right? You find out things that you realize how much you don't know, or now I see it more when it's at me. Like, there's probably more to this that I don't totally understand. So some of that might just be life experience and failing a few times.
I think it's remarkable that both of you now are project managers, right?
Program
managers.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Get it right.
Right, I will. But you both went through Mission 43's, I think, the inaugural PMP course, or Project Management Professional course, and both are PMP certified. It's something that I didn't know existed until Allison Garrow, our education director, created this program. We've had, I think she's had like a 90% success rate of people passing and getting their things, and we're on our 6th cohort right now, but you guys are part of the first one. Can you tell us a little bit about, like, what that experience is like and what's happened since?
Yeah, I guess to start, when I was transitioning out, like the PMP course was one of the things offered during separation. I was trying to take it online, and I think I got like 5% of the way through the course and then completely pushed it to the side and didn't even, like, I was so disheartened by the whole experience that I was just like, this isn't for me. And so what was amazing about the Mission 43 cohort was now I'm not sure if this is the current model, but for us at least, it was in person. We were in Boise with 7 or 8 other people. We could learn from each other, right? Everybody had project management experience in the class. And
it is the same.
Yeah. And
if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Good,
that's
yeah.
right. And you felt supported going through. I think this is no reflection of mine or Katie's intellect, but we both aced our test. Largely because of that support network and that model, whereas I couldn't even get through 10% of the course when I was going through and transitioning on my own. So
it was a place to ask questions and a safe place to be vulnerable when you're learning something new. There's always this anxiety, and there's a learning curve that's kind of painful to get through.
Sure.
Right? And that course, and with the people in that course, that made it a really a safe group to learn with. Mm-hmm. And that was, for me, a big, it was just a big opportunity for me in my career too. I feel way more competent in the projects and programs that I tackle. It helped me get over, there's this imposter syndrome that people tend to have when they go into a new career or into a new role, especially somebody's talked to me about this at work one time, about imposter syndrome, especially when you're a program or project manager.
Sure.
Because you always did something before that. Mm-hmm. Nobody just goes in out of college and is a project manager or a program manager. They usually have some background before that. So I felt like a recruiter sitting in a program manager's seat. And that course helped me get over that imposter syndrome and give some confidence into what I'm doing on a daily basis, that I'm the right person for this role. I know what I'm doing. And I've got the certification to prove it, right? It helped me get over that.
It shows you Katie is a much better employee than I am. I was going through, like, I'm going to get the certification, like, I'm going to pass the test, and Katie was off taking notes, like, my team is going to do this, my team is going to do this, right? And she's put a lot of it to really good use in her role, and, like, incorporated a lot of PMI's sort of mechanisms into her job at Amazon.
Wouldn't say she's a better employee, but better leader, certainly.
Just better person, really.
Better person, overall.
Person.
Without a question. Yeah,
well, but I don't think I would have done it without Mission 43 offering it. Well, truly.
What has changed in your career since then, besides like your, inherent confidence and knowledgeability in your role, comfort in your role, I guess? Has anything, like, have you guys actually changed positions since receiving that certification? Yeah, actually.
Originally, right after the certification, I was approached and I went to a different company for a while. It ended up not being the right role for me. The role had morphed into something that wasn't quite what I was expecting or the right skill set even. But it offered me, it really did, again, confidence building, because then I knew that the skill set that I had been building and the professional growth that I had received helped me understand that I was worth something, right? I was worth more, and that I was being sought out for roles. The second part of it, so then I pivoted back to Amazon with the exact same team. I realized very quickly that I had kind of a gem of a team and decided to go right back. But recently moved into another role within the team too. So working more in a vendor manager capacity for our talent acquisition team, and working on a little bit more automation. And it's a new role that I'm just starting. So still have a lot to learn there. We'll find out what that role is as it unfolds, but I think a lot of it is due to some of that professional development that was available that I could capitalize on with Mission 43.
That's awesome. What about you, Jarrett?
Yeah, I actually changed teams internally at Amazon as well. So I went from being an operations manager and then started as a program manager in worldwide returns. And that really introduced me to agile methodology. I was working with a lot of tech teams. And it was interesting going through the PMI course because I started that job never having worked in the tech space before. And PMI had just sort of changed their curriculum and their focus. And a lot of it was looking at agile environments and incorporating tech project management with PMI methodologies. So it was super valuable to me. I joked about Katie taking notes, but I think we both found the course super valuable. And truthfully, like the timing was coincidental, but like the things that I learned in the course really helped me realize, like, okay, here's sort of a map for what good project management looks like in a tech and agile environment, and here's kind of what our organization is currently doing. Could be a reason for that, but like let's kind of examine some of those assumptions. So it was really helpful for me.
I got to tell you, you guys are like rock stars in the Mission 43 community, and there's a lot of them, but it's been amazingly gratifying to see your guys' progress, and I can't believe it's only been 3 years. I know I've said that before, but it's amazing to see what you guys have done as a family, as a couple, as professionals, and I just can't thank you enough for being a part of it. And I hope that you'll be willing to talk to people in your organization and outside of it, just the Mission 43 organization as a whole, about some of your words of wisdom in the transition process.
Well, thanks for having us, Dan. This has been awesome, and I think Mission 43 has definitely been integral to that success, that whatever we've experienced too, and making our transition actually a stable and hopefully joyful one versus the panic that maybe we expected.
Well, humans are more important than hardware, so definitely it's the people that make up the organization like you that make it what it is. So thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Well, thanks, Dan.
Thanks for joining us for the Mission 43 podcast. Our purpose is to provide you opportunities to lead, learn, and inspire throughout your Idaho communities.